Hey everybody, today we are looking at the fruit of the Spirit called gentleness. Now, if you're anything like me, when you look through the list of the fruit of the Spirit, joy, love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, a lot of those things seem really attractive, don't they? When I think about joy, that's something that I want. I want to experience joy. Even patience, right? This understanding of patience as being something is really good and helpful, and even though I'm not very patient, it is something that I want. But when I think of gentleness, I don't have the same sort of desire for gentleness for some reason, right? How often have you prayed, God, I pray that you would make me gentle? So what do we do with that? And I think maybe the problem that I have, why it's something that I don't really desire, is I never really understood what gentleness means and how it works biblically. So let's have a little examination of this word. All right, gentleness simply, it comes from a word that simply means power restrained. It's the same sort of thought as humility or meekness. That's a word that we don't often use in today's language, but those words are pretty interchangeable. Gentleness, meekness, humility. But they all have the same sort of reference. They're all talking about the same thing. So when you think of humility, when you think of meekness, when you think of gentleness, those words are not talking about weakness, which is what we normally associate with those words, right? When you think of being humble or being meek, you think of someone who's weak or cowardly or silent, right? But that's not really what those words, that's not what this word means. It actually means power restrained. So when we are being humble, when we are being gentle, it means that we actually have lots of power or influence or knowledge or wisdom, or we know better than someone else in the room, and yet we're not lording it over people. We're not trying to dominate and use our influence, use our power, or use our skills or our gifts to make other people look or feel bad. The opposite of gentleness is abrasiveness, which is sort of a character trait for many people in our world today, especially, I find, men. It's sort of a thing as you move up the corporate ladder that you are expected to be more and more abrasive. I recently watched a documentary on Netflix called The Last Dance that documented the career of famous NBA star Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is arguably the best basketball player to have ever lived. And the documentary showed sort of all his successes and the journey of his career. And he's an amazing basketball player. I don't know if there'll ever be anyone quite like him. But you watch the documentary and you realize that Michael Jordan is maybe the most abrasive person that you'll ever see. Like, he was just rude to teammates. He put people down. He insulted people. He just constantly looked down on people. And in these interviews, there are people, his teammates, his former coaches or whatever, that say, yeah, it was great winning championships with Michael Jordan, but I actually didn't like the guy, right? He made me feel terrible. He made me feel not good enough, and I don't talk to him to this day. And that's sort of the opposite of what gentleness is. This sort of abrasiveness where we rub people the wrong way, we tell it like it is, that we don't care about hurting people's feelings as long as we can keep getting what we want. The interesting thing is that this is not what Jesus is like, right? Jesus is the very pinnacle of gentleness. You look at Philippians chapter 2, where Paul says that though being in the very nature God, he did not consider equality with God as something to be used to his own advantage, but instead he humbled himself, became gentle, power restrained. And because of that, he took the form of a servant. And in the same way, this is a way that we communicate the gospel to people. Because we are, not because we are weak, but because we are people who may be really gifted or powerful or influential or knowledgeable or whatever, but we don't hold it over people's heads. Instead, we come alongside people and love them and show kindness to them. There's one really cool verse that I think illustrates this really well, and it comes from 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. You may remember the first part of it, which we often talk about in church, but we don't focus on the last part, which is very important. It says this: always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. Right? We talk about this as always be ready to explain your faith and why you love Jesus, the hope that you have. You should stand up for yourself, right? That's how we understand that, but here's how it ends. But do this with gentleness and respect. So, the next time you want to share your faith, do it, but don't do it in such a way that you turn people off because you have the best arguments or you put people down or whatever. But Peter is saying there's a way that we can share this hope that we have without looking down on people or condescending or alienating people or making people feel really small. Gentleness is exactly what Jesus was like. That though he was God himself, he made himself nothing so that we could relate to him and so that he could extend his love to us. In the same way, gentleness as the fruit of the Spirit, that's something that as we pursue God's Spirit in our lives, it becomes more and more evident that we don't have to get our way. We don't have to have the last word in. We don't have to dominate people or look better than everyone else, but we can hold back. We can let other people have the spotlight, and we can come alongside people and love people with the same servant-heartedness that Jesus has. So, maybe you and I, next time when we pray, ought to ask that God would help us to be gentle, just like Jesus.